Welcome back, it's Jennifer. Glad you're here. So today I am sharing with you 4 more ways to use a brayer without a gel press and with basic stamping inks. In my previous video, I shared 4 other ways. Be sure to check that out if you haven't. That video was about using the brayer with stamps and dies. This video is about using a brayer with embossing folders and stencils. I'll link to that other video here in case you missed it. I just find a brayer a tool that every crafter should have because it can be used in so many wonderful ways. Just a quick review of the tools I'll be focusing on today. I really like the Holtz Brayers. I think these apply ink really well, especially stamping ink. They have 2 little feet that allow you to prop it up so you don't get mess all over your desk. And you can pull the roller out so that you can easily clean it. There is also a loop for a handle so you can easily hang it. There are 2 sizes available. Either would be fine. I do recommend having one of each size. I actually have multiple brayers because I end up making a lot at once, so it's handy to have. But really, you're good with one brayer. As for what inks to use with your brayers, try whatever you have. Most inks will work well. I decided to use the Simon Says Stamp Saturated Dye inks. I just find these inks are beautiful color palette, and they work really well with the brayer. I also have my ink stand on hand to hold the ink pad as I roll the ink onto the brayer. It really is handy. And then finally, I have my Waffle flower stencil mat that's very helpful in holding the paper still as we use the brayer. Okay, let's get started with our first idea for using a brayer without a gel press, and that is to use it with an embossing folder. I've done this technique in videos before. In fact, I'll link to a video all about it here in the top right so you can find more creative ways to do this technique. But I felt I should include it in this video as it's one of the best ways to use a brayer. I'm starting with the Simon Says Stamp Exotic Vines embossing folder. This is a new one and it is gorgeous. I'm also using my Spellbinders Platinum. You could use any die cut machine. Here you'll find me testing out what sandwich to do. It's always better to start with less and then add what you need. I found that if I did the main platform, a metal shim, 1 cardstock shim, and then the embossing folder, I'm good to go. But remember, you can go to Simon Says Stamp's website. In the instructions for the embossing folder, it'll give you whatever sandwich you need for whatever machine you may have. And look at that beautiful detail. I'll be using this embossing folder a lot. Now let's step this up by adding color or ink to the background of this. So I'm taking the embossing folder and I'm feeling the inside. I'll be adding ink to the side where the raised areas are flat. It's really easy to find. You just rub your fingers over it. Wherever the background is sticking up is where you want to apply the ink. So I am applying ink with my brayer right onto the embossing folder. The reason using a brayer is great here is it won't get into the valleys, so the ink will only end up being on the background. It gives you a very clear result. Now I'm applying 1 soft color here. You could use multiple colors, you could use more bold colors, but I wanted something soft. So I'm putting my cardstock, laying it down on the other side of the folder. Then I close the folder on it, not allowing the cardstock to shift, and I run it through my die cut machine. So the pressure of the die cut machine will push that ink into the valleys or the background. And now you have color on the background and it's white on all the raised. I think this is such a beautiful, elegant way to use an embossing folder. When you're done, all you need to do is wipe your embossing folder clean and you're ready to use it again. Okay, let's turn this into a card. I want it to have an elegant celebration cake on the front. I'm using 2 new die sets from Simon Says Stamp, the fancy cake dies and the decorated cake dies. These can be used together or you can use the basic cake by itself. I like that there are many tiers for the cake, and so you can build this however you want. I just went with a pretty basic assembly of the die cuts and it's very easy to do. Here I'm assembling the die cuts in all white cardstock because I thought I wanted an all white die cut on my background, but it ended up being too light. So I'll end up changing it to other colors, but I wanted to show you this basic assembly. I think this is so elegant, could be for weddings, or you can add the candles for birthday. So many different celebrations you can do. Okay, so I ended up doing the cake with a pool colored cardstock and the cake stand with silver cardstock. Here I'm adding some darker color to the candles and to parts of the cake. I also used a gold marker for the flames of the candles. So I did all of this with the pool color cardstock and silver cardstock alone. You could decorate this cake with little tiny die-cut hearts or die-cut flowers. I mean, you could go to town with it, but I decided to keep it simple. I added my cake onto the inked embossing foldered background, and then I put that on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top-folded white note card. I did add a few little white gel pen dots to the cake for more accent, and I added a Celebrate die cut. That's from a discontinued Memory Box Celebrate die set, but any celebration message would work there. You can see that soft embossing folder background. I could have done something with more contrast, but I wanted it to be soft, and this is one of those cards that looks so much better in real life than on video and in the photos. But here are a few other backgrounds I did using a peach ink. That's a beautiful option too. So try using your brayer and inks in your embossing folder. It really steps up those backgrounds. Okay, my second idea is again using your brayer with your embossing folder, but after you do the embossing. This is one of my favorite ways to use a brayer, and you can create such unique looks. So this time I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Pinpoint Starlets embossing folder. This is another favorite of mine. I just like the simple look that it gives. It works with a variety of cards. So I've run it through as normal with white cardstock. There you can see the detail this offers. It's beautiful. So the first idea, I actually have a couple here, is to apply ink over the raised area of your background that you just created with the embossing folder. You'll want to roll this back and forth lightly. If you press too hard, you flatten the pattern and you get ink in the valleys. This time we want ink on the raised areas. This gives such a cleaner, more crisp result than using any kind of blending tool to apply ink to the raised areas. Definitely one of the best ways to use a brayer. So you can see all of the raised areas have ink on them. Beautiful, crisp results. You could do multiple colors if you wanted to. I find this technique also works really well if you use colored cardstock. Here I used a pink cardstock and I'm applying a light pink ink over the raised areas. That could be something that's just very subtle and just makes the pattern stand out more. However, I did go back and put a darker pink over it just to show how much you can make it stand out. Here's a closer look, just showing how detailed that ends up being. The brayer only puts the ink over the raised area and leaves the background alone. Now, if you're using an embossing folder with large background areas, the brayer may get into those valleys. This works really well with any kind of tight pattern like this one or the one I used before. Okay, so now let's try another way to do this. A second way is to apply ink over the back of our cardstock where we've used the embossing folder. So this will actually give us a completely different look. So I'm applying ink over the background. This time I'm using a little more pressure. So this time what was raised is now a valley. So your background is standing up more, so it's grabbing the ink. And look at that. So you can flip it and you see you get two different looks. One's lighter, one's darker. It's just fun to use your embossing folder in a different way so you can get more value from it. I love this look, and it works with a lot of different embossing folders. So I decided to go back to the white background, flip it over, and apply different colors of ink to that surface. So in this case, we'll have a lot of ink color, and we'll just have those white highlights that are actually little valleys in our background. So I am applying different colors over this. I'm kind of following that pattern I did in my last video where I do like a triangle of 3 spots of a color. Then I go and move on to another color and do kind of a triangle of 3 spots of that too. Then I just fill in the leftover area. With the brayer, you can go over the same area more to make it darker, go over it once to make it light. It's a great way to kind of blend too. But here I am just putting down lots of color overlapping in different ways to kind of create an abstract look. In the end, it will kind of soften and give a little bit of blending, but it's really a unique way to quickly add color to a background. Then finally, I'm adding some yellow. This is Concord and 9th Buttercup, my favorite yellow, and putting that in a few spots, and there we have a colorful background. There is still texture to it. It's just upside down from what we would normally use this folder as. You have both options with your embossing folder backgrounds. I am heat setting this since I put so much ink on the surface. I want to keep it nice and crisp, and look at that beautiful result. This is definitely a technique I'll be doing more in the future. Okay, now I did trim that down, and I'm adding it onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. I will cut a little bit off the side and bottom there to center it. But one great way to use a brayer also is to press surfaces together. So I put glue on that background that has lots of texture. By rolling my brayer over it, it presses it down so it adheres nicely. Okay, let's finish off this card before I move on to another idea. For this, I used a couple die sets from Simon Says Stamp. First, we have the Wreath of Love die. I've used this one before in video. I'll link to it at the top right here. And then also one of my all-time old favorites, the Simon Says Stamp Big Friend die set. So I cut the Wreath of Love from white cardstock. I actually stacked 2 layers together for dimension. Then I put more glue on the back of the layered die cut, and I add it onto vellum. Once it's glued onto the vellum, I'll use my scissors to cut the excess vellum away, so I only have vellum in the center of the heart. By putting vellum at the center of the heart, it kind of mutes that bold pattern so that our sentiment will stand out more. Vellum is great on bold cards because it'll allow you to kind of soften the background in an area so you can bring focus to it. Now I'm putting glue on the back of that and adding that to the top center of our card. I also created the friend die cut using white cardstock for the shadow and black cardstock for the friend word itself. And I added a Simon Says Stamp CZ design pre-printed sentiment strip that says enjoy your day. Those pre-printed strips are a great value and are a quick way to add sentiments onto your cards. I also added a few pearls to the wreath for a little bit of bling. So there you can see that beautiful background that we were able to create using an ink and brayer over an embossing folder background. This is definitely going on my favorite techniques list. Okay, now let's explore some ways to use your brayer and ink with stencils. There are many ways you can do this, but I'm sharing with you the 2 that I think are most effective with pretty much any stencil you have. For my first technique, I think it's best to tape your stencil to the edge of your cardstock to create kind of a book. So the tape is serving as little hinges. This is super helpful. I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Bitty Florals stencil. This is a great one. Now I'm laying my cardstock and stencil onto my stencil mat, and I'm applying ink onto my stencil. I'm doing kind of a rainbow of colors here, so I'm starting with green on the bottom. I will then close the book, which closes the cardstock onto that ink, and I use the brayer on the back of it with a scrap piece of cardstock to press it down. So watch, I'll do it again. I'll apply more green ink, close it, then I put scrap cardstock on top of my cardstock and run the brayer over it. This piece of scrap cardstock here will build up ink also, and I can use that for something else. So now I've got green applied to that bottom. You can do as many layers as you want. I'm using pretty soft color inks here, so I end up doing a few times for each color, but you could start with more bold color if you only want to do it once or twice. Now make sure that you overlap your color. So notice I'm overlapping this pool color with the green I've already done. The more you overlap, the more it'll blend from one to the other. Now you could just roll the brayer onto the back of your cardstock. No one will ever see it. But by putting the scrap cardstock on top, you're taking that excess ink onto the scrap cardstock and use that for something too. So now I'm moving up and using a brighter blue ink for the next color. You could do the entire stencil one color, you could use darker inks, whatever you want. But I wanted to try to blend from one to another but have a soft background in the end. So after doing blue, I added some purple in the top. I used Hero Art's Soft Lilac ink, and there we have a beautiful blended background. And note that the result is reverse of what you would have gotten if you put the stencil over cardstock and ink blended over it. If you put the stencil on cardstock and did blending over it, you'd have colored flowers. But in our example, the background is colored and the flowers are white. It's fun to be able to get the reverse from a stencil also, and this is a great way to do that. Okay, so for this card, I just trimmed the background down and put it on a mini slimline note card that I cut to 3.5 by 6 1/4 inches. I used the friend dies that I used before with white and black cardstock, and also a pre-printed Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip. Now the heart that's on is also from Simon Says Stamp, and I die cut that from a pool colored cardstock. I also added little white pearls to the center of the flowers in the background. This is a very simple card, but I really like that it allows those soft colors in the background to show. I found that this particular technique works really well with pretty much any stencil, so I hope you'll give it a try. Okay, our fourth technique also involves a stencil, but this time we're also going to make an impression with the stencil. Now for this one, I'm using some new Simon Says Stamp stencils. It's actually one stencil from a set. This is the new Layering Heart Mandala stencil set. I'll be using the stencil you see on the top right, but do know that it also comes with those mask stencils that allow you to ink up different areas, different color. I think this is a brilliant idea, but for today's technique, I'm just using the one intricate stencil. I'm first setting up my die cut machine to use the embossing mat. With the Spellbinders Platinum, I use the platform, then the embossing mat, which is that flexible brown piece, and I have my embossing plate, that blue plate, ready to go. On top of the embossing mat, I'm putting a piece of cardstock and I'm setting that aside so it's ready. All die cut machines can do this type of embossing. You just need to look at the instructions. Okay, I have my stencil here on my stencil mat, and I am picking up different colors using the brayer and applying it right onto the stencil. You'll see me go off to the left-hand side of the screen. That's so I can run my brayer onto that scrap paper to take the excess ink off before I move on to the next ink color, because I don't want to taint my ink pads. And that scrap paper off screen can be used for another card background. So I'm just applying 3 different colors here. I'm using a light, dark, green, and then also a blue. Once I have color all over my background, I will pick this up and lay it directly onto that white cardstock, ink side down. And I'll make sure that I don't let that shift. You just place it down, leave it, put the embossing plate on top, run it back and forth through your die cut machine. And what happens is, because we have that flexible embossing mat in there, the stencil will actually leave a bit of an impression on the cardstock. And it transfers the ink from the stencil onto the cardstock. It's hard to see in the video, but the white areas are slightly raised. If you want it to stand out more, you can put a cardstock shim in there to give more pressure, but I like it as is. Here's a lighter inked version I did earlier. I just think it's a great way to apply a lot of color to a stencil. And again, this is reverse of what you would get if you put the stencil down and applied ink over it. In this case, your background has the color on it, which is a great way to change up a stencil's look. So I trimmed that down and added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. I again added a pool color heart along with the layered friend die cut and a Simon Says Stamp pre-printed sentiment strip. I did also add some white pearls to the background just for a little bit of bling. So our last technique did not use a die cut machine, but this technique actually creates an impression along with transferring the ink. So either option works great. This one just creates a bit of texture too. So between this video and my last video, that's 8 creative ways to use a brayer and ink without a gel press. Now there are many more ways to use it, and if you use it with a gel press, there are many more. I encourage you to give this all a try. It really is a great way to stretch your supplies and have some fun while doing so. If you're interested in what I use, I link it below in my YouTube description. At the end here, I link to a couple other videos you might be interested in. I thank you for spending this time with me. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again very soon.